Senator Russ Strickland from Maryland, Emergency Management. Thanks for joining us. Can you tell me how the addition of a Mesonet in Maryland is going to improve forecasting?
Well, I can't say anything other than how excited we are about it. A Mesonet system it's really a system of systems because there's weather stations that will be throughout the state, and it'll be gathering information, keeping it in as simplest terms as possible here, but giving that information to the National Weather Service so that number one priority, we can alert people for floods and alert people for wind faster than we have in the past. So when it comes time for a tornado, it may give us additional seconds to get a warning now, and that could save somebody's life. Flash flooding, it may give us maybe several minutes ahead of time. That'll save somebody's life. So that's the most important thing and the most exciting thing about, gathering this data. The Doppler radar system is absolutely fabulous, but it does not necessarily get the ground truth that a Mesonet system throughout a state can gather.
Does this exist anywhere else? Does any other state have a Mesonet?
I think we are joining as number 29 of the 50 states that have a Mesonet system. We are the first state, to the best of my knowledge, that has been able to obtain the funding so that we could build out the system immediately. And when I say immediately, it's going to take a couple years to build it out, but we have the funding to be able to put these stations throughout the state in a pretty dispersed fashion that will give us good ground truth across our entire state.
There are some rural parts of Maryland and across the country. Is this going to help warn people that may have had a very limited warning system in the past?
Well, it's going to provide information and data into a system that the National Weather Service will be able to use that will then transmit the alert or warning to them. So we may have to look at how do we improve just communications in general in certain areas of the state. And we've gone through this with the radio systems in the state of Maryland. And we do know we have some spots in the state that are challenging, but that's something we'll look at through the local level and see what it is we can do to improve that communications capability.
You mentioned the National Weather Service. Are there any other systems in the state that will benefit and use a Mesonet?
Yes. I think there are several. First off, we have a pretty extensive system through the Maryland Department of Transportation where they're constantly monitoring road conditions. That system should be able to tie into this, which will almost kind of like duplicate and give us additional stations throughout the state. But they will benefit from it. Department of Transportation will benefit from it. Department of Agriculture would benefit from it. Department of Health from weather climate changes and what that may do to some of the health concerns in an area, the same way with social services. And then for us, from a preparedness perspective and building out plans for the future, we'll have data that'll be built up over time that's going to tell us historically what has happened. And when we look at some of the climate adaptation, the change in the climate patterns, we can bring all of that together and have better and more effective plans for local areas of the state as well as our statewide perspective.
Will the community be involved in the operation at all?
We're establishing an advisory board, and we're in the process of doing all of that. But there'll be key state agencies along with the University of Maryland that'll be very, very much involved. And the University of Maryland is really a partner side by side with the Maryland Department of Emergency Management on this project. But we'll also be reaching out to the private sector and citizen groups and local jurisdictions that get their input as to what specific needs we might have in an area.
I read about a personal story of yours with the University of Maryland back in 2001, a tornado. How does the addition of a Mesonet change the response, perhaps from what you experienced back in '01?
Yeah, that was very, very traumatic. And what basically happened there is we had a tornado touchdown right behind the temporary building the Maryland Fire and Rescue Institute was in. I was an assistant director there at the time. I was not in the building, but my co-assistant director was, and it was his two daughters who unfortunately were killed in that event. And had we had a few seconds more warning as to what exactly was happening with that tornado, it's possible, the outcome would have been different.